Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and we're going to talk about bards. Not an entire party full of bards, we're just going to talk about one feature of the bard class, and that is font of inspiration. I know what you're thinking. Font of inspiration, Fred, is like 2 sentences. Why do we need to cover it? Well, because that's what this whole series is all about, but also too there are a couple of things I wanted to point out which I know occasionally people forget. So if you have a look at page 54 of the Player's Handbook, you'll find the information on font of inspiration. So from the book, this is what it says. Beginning when you reach 5th level, you regain all of your expended uses of bardic inspiration when you finish a short rest or a long rest. Now, in the past, you needed to complete a long rest to get all of your bardic inspirations back. So if you've used any of your bardic inspiration, you get them all back if you get a short rest in, which is a big deal because bardic inspiration is pretty powerful as a feature. So what I wanted to do is talk briefly about why it's so impressive and why you should be making sure you're using that bardic inspiration every chance you get. Because the reality is, it's a really good feature and it's not really something that you should sort of forget about. Don't forget about it. So the first thing I did notice is I looked on the internet to see if there was any information on bardic inspiration and sage advice. Were there any outstanding questions that people tended to have? And as it happens, no, there really aren't any outstanding questions that people have. There's really no information on sage advice for font of inspiration, which is a good sign. That means that most people understand what's going on. So you don't need to hoard your bardic inspiration anymore for that long rest. Don't hoard it. Use it up. Make sure you use it. Make sure you use your bardic inspiration before you get the short rest in. Pump up that charisma score and modifier, because if the score goes up, you should also be increasing your modifier on your charisma, and that is what is going to determine how many uses of bardic inspiration you will get. So any chance you get to pump up charisma, do that, because that means you get to use bardic inspiration more, and because of the combination of font of inspiration, you're going to get even more uses of that particular feature. So what I was going to do is just quickly grab the map and the dice and sort of demonstrate briefly and give you a sort of 3 examples that I thought would be useful. Now, if you'll notice, I pulled up the chart for the bard, and at 5th level, okay, level 5, your font of inspiration comes into play. But you'll also notice that bardic inspiration changes. It's no longer a 6-sided dice or D6. It's now an 8-sided dice or D8. So in other words, the average that you will roll on that dice is going to be higher. So in other words, it's even more powerful than it was before. Hence why it's so important to use it up. Now, when you're building your character, you're probably going to find that most characters that are playing a bard will have a 16 in their charisma modifier, which means which means their modifier is a +3. So if you've got a 16 in your score, you get a +3. Should really be the lowest score you get, particularly at level 5. If you've increased your charisma, chances are you'll have an 18 in charisma and a +4 in your charisma modifier, which is all good. That means more uses of your bardic inspiration. So that means on average, most combats and most dungeon masters, when they run their adventures, are going to run maybe between 3 and 4 encounters, combat encounters, or just straight out encounters, which means you really should be using your bardic inspiration at least every single encounter, so that by the time you have finished your 3rd or 4th encounter, you get to have your short rest, hopefully, and then you get all of your bardic inspiration back. So don't hoard it. Okay, at this point you should have more than enough to last you to the next rest. So don't hoard it. So I'm going to use the King's Road. I've got my adventuring party here. I've got my bard here, and I have simply picked the key core classes. So I've got here a barbarian or fighter. I've got a cleric. I've got a wizard, and I've got a rogue. And I'm going to pick on only 3 for today. And we're going to deal with how you can use your Bardic Inspiration and why you might do so. Okay, remember 3 or 4 encounters, and then you're probably going to get to have a short rest. So don't hoard it. So let's start off with the Cleric. Now, one of the things about a Cleric is they're usually going to be wearing heavy armor. So they will have disadvantage when they're making a stealth check, which is a big pain, honestly. For anybody who has played the game and you're making a stealth check, because you're often making stealth checks, you really want to have another dice there, okay, that's going to give you the lowest score. That's really what you want. It's like disadvantage on any check. No, not really. So, disadvantage, rolling 2 dice, taking the lowest result when you're making your stealth check. But if you know that your Cleric is going to be having to make a stealth check, maybe you're moving up to a location where there's a lair or a castle or a hideout for your baddie, then make sure you give them that Bardic Inspiration. It's no longer that 6-sided dice. Forget about that. It's now an 8-sided dice. So they get to roll that as well. They might still have disadvantage, but that means on average they're looking at between a 4 and a 5. They get to add on to whatever is the lowest score on those 2 dice when you're making that stealth check. So for my Cleric here, it's not a very good modifier for their stealth. It's pretty awful. I think it's something in the range of like a -2 for our Cleric with the heavy armor and disadvantage. So I roll my dice. So I get a 3, I get an 8 on my 8-sided dice, so I have to take the lowest result, so the big number goes away. That's a 4 minus 1, that's like a 3, so 4 minus 1 is 3, but I rolled 7. I rolled a 7 on the inspiration dice, because they can choose to use it. They've got 10 minutes to use it, okay? So as long as you're building up and you've timed it right, that means I no longer have 3, I have 10. Now, if you have a beast around or creature, your Dungeon Master is probably going to have the use of passive perception. They're going to use passive perception. They probably won't use an active check, but they might, but it doesn't matter. For this situation, I have an air elemental that has been flying around here. They don't know about it. The party is moving through this area, up to a lair, or through this location. They figure it's quite dangerous. This is a good time to use it. Bardic Inspiration won't help with a stealth check for your Cleric if you're traveling over a long period of time from one place to another, because you're dealing with hours and Bardic Inspiration only lasts for 10 minutes. But I use it, I apply it, that's a 10. Now the passive perception of our air elemental is 10, and our Cleric got 10. But you can see the point. I almost passed that. It was almost possible for the Cleric to have moved through that area, been unseen if they've used cover, and unheard and unsmelt. So that's why it's so useful. It literally doubled what we had there. So that is for our Cleric. What about if we have a Barbarian getting into combat? So the Barbarian winds up in combat and they have to make some attacks. Okay, so we roll our dice, we make our attack with our Great Axe, and the worst thing that could happen, I rolled a 13 plus whatever the modifier would be, and in this case it's probably like a +6 for a character who's about level 5, maybe a +7, okay? But what if I roll a 4? Alright, a 4 is pretty low, and I add a +6 to that, that's only 10. But if I have Bardic Inspiration, which you can use on an attack roll, not just an ability check or a skill check, like our stealth check, roll that, will that make the difference? I was really, really close. The armor class of our air elemental is a 15, okay? So if I'm adding a 6 or 7 to this, say a 6, that's 10, that's 14, it was just shy. Okay, on average, you're going to roll about a 4 or a 5 on an 8-sided dice. Okay, what about our last example? What happens if the air elemental decides to move through the party, which it can? It's got a thing called Whirlwind, and it requires a strength saving throw to resist being hurled out of the way and taking damage. So this is going to come through this location. Who's likely to suffer the most at the hands of the air elemental? Who's got to make a strength saving throw? Well, it's going to probably be the wizard. It's probably the wizard. So this is a good time to give them, as the bard, you do your thing. You say, look, I'm going to give you bardic inspiration to my wizard, and they can use it at any time they like. I would suggest using it for a saving throw, because the air elemental might come through and try to knock you out of the way. So when you're making your saving throw, you roll your dice, right? I don't have disadvantage. I rolled an 8, and if I need it to be a little bit higher, because it's not quite high enough, because strength, usually your wizard's only going to have, it's either going to be a minus, or it might even be just a flat 0. In this case, let's say it's a flat 0. I roll my inspiration dice, so I get 8 plus 0 is 8, plus a 5. Okay, what's the grand total of that? That's 13. Now the strength saving throw for the whirlwind ability for an air elemental is a DC 13 strength saving throw. So that means you actually succeeded as the wizard, because your bard gave you inspiration. So don't hoard your inspiration. You have font of inspiration. Okay, your bardic inspiration is really, really important. Make sure you allocate it. Be selective when you do so. Remember that 10 minutes. And that's really all I wanted to say about bardic inspiration for today. So if you found this video helpful or informative, please share and like the video. Consider subscribing to my channel if you like this sort of content, because I often do it live, and also I do have edited videos. Hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. If you want to support me, you did so by watching this video. I have hundreds more videos for players and dungeon masters, and there is a series on the bard for those of you who are interested in the bard rather than something else. Now, I don't do Patreon, but down in the description you'll find affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon, where you can buy stuff online. I get a small commission, and that helps support the channel so I can keep buying equipment and doing this sort of thing. This is your opportunity now in the live chat to ask questions, give feedback, or just say hi to me. I am open to anything. And for those of you who are not part of the live chat or the live stream, you can use the comments section. That's what YouTube put it there for. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.